January 18th, 1943. 0211 hours. 27 kilometers south of Leningrad. Soviet Air Defense Sector, Red Banner. The room smells of hot dust, oil, and ozone. Senior Lieutenant Alexei Morozov stands hunched over the cathode ray display, his gloved hand hovering just above the glass, as if touching it might steady the chaos unfolding inside. The green sweep line rotates once every 4 seconds, a soft mechanical hum filling the underground bunker. Each rotation is supposed to bring certainty, distance, altitude, direction. Tonight, it brings confusion. At first, the blips appeared exactly as doctrine promised: clean, disciplined, German aircraft forming up west of the front, just beyond the effective range of Soviet fighters. Morozov had seen this pattern before, another Luftwaffe night raid probing the battered lifeline of Leningrad. He logged the contacts. Range 112 kilometers. Altitude 6,000 meters. Course east. The phone lines crackled as reports flowed upward, to the command post, to fighter regiments, to anti-aircraft batteries waiting in the frozen forests. Everything was under control. Then the screens began to bloom. Not spike by spike, but flooding, like ink dropped into water. "Comrade Lieutenant," whispered Corporal Yevgeny Petrov, the youngest operator in the room, "I'm seeing more returns." Morozov narrowed his eyes. The once distinct aircraft echoes were multiplying, dozens, then hundreds, stacked on top of one another, smeared across the scope like a constellation gone mad. Altitude readings made no sense. Speed estimates contradicted physics. Targets appeared, vanished, reappeared closer, then farther away, then everywhere at once. This was not a raid. This was something else. "Switch to backup frequency," Morozov ordered. Petrov's fingers flew over the dials. The sweeping line reset. For half a second, the screen cleared. Then exploded again. Across the bunker, Captain Nikolai Zorin, sector duty officer, slammed his fist onto the plotting table. Paper markers skidded across the map of Leningrad and the Gulf of Finland. "That's impossible," Zorin snapped. "No formation can be that dense. Check the set." Morozov had already done it. The RUS-2, Radut, radar, the pride of Soviet early warning, was functioning perfectly. Power stable, antenna rotation nominal, calibration unchanged. The machine was healthy. Reality was not. Outside, the night is brutally still. -20 degrees. Snow creaks under boots. Somewhere far above the cloud layer, engines drone, but they do not match what the screens are showing. In the command room, the confidence that once defined Soviet air defense doctrine begins to fracture. "Report to headquarters," Zorin says, voice tight. "Multiple massed contacts, possibly deception?" Morozov hesitates before speaking. "Comrade Captain, the returns are behaving like metal, but not like aircraft." The word hangs in the air. Metal. Radar works by reflecting radio waves off solid objects, aircraft, bombers, fighters, aluminum skin and steel frames. But what Morozov is seeing, these returns are too numerous, too chaotic, yet perfectly reflective, as if the sky itself has been filled with fragments of aircraft. The phone rings. Moscow. Zorin answers, snaps to attention, even though no one can see him. "Yes, Comrade General, we have the raid plotted. Yes, confirmed on multiple sets." A pause.
Zoran's face tightens. No, Comrade General, we cannot assign exact numbers. The contacts are fluctuating. Another pause, longer this time. Morozov watches Zoran's knuckles whiten around the receiver. Yes, Comrade General, Zoran says finally. We are confident the enemy is attempting to overwhelm our detection. He hangs up slowly. They want fighter intercepts launched immediately, all regiments. Morozov turns back to the screen. If those blips are real, hundreds of German bombers are inbound. If they're false, Soviet fighters will be sent blind into empty sky, burning fuel, revealing positions, exhausting pilots. Either way, the system is being forced to react. And that is when the first blackout happens. The sweep line stutters. The hum deepens. Then, without warning, the screen goes dark. Not a power failure, not static, black. One by one, across the bunker, scopes begin to die. Operators shout, switches are thrown, backup generators kick in. Nothing. The Radut radars, machines that had seen through darkness, fog, and storm, have been blinded. Morozov feels a cold realization settle in his chest, heavier than the winter outside. This is not a bombing raid. This is a weapon. And somewhere in the frozen sky above the Eastern Front, the enemy has just rewritten the rules of war, without firing a single shot.
The blackout lasts 11 seconds. To the men in the bunker, it feels like an eternity. When the scopes flicker back to life, the chaos has only grown worse. The screens no longer show formations, they show clouds. Vast, drifting masses of radar returns, moving slowly eastward, spreading and thinning like smoke carried by high-altitude winds. Targets decelerating? Corporal Kutroff mutters, voice cracking. That's impossible. Morozov leans closer. He notices something subtle, something that makes his stomach tighten. The echoes aren't maneuvering. They aren't climbing or diving. They're floating. Outside, searchlights stab upward, probing empty sky. Anti-aircraft crews acting on earlier reports fire test salvos, white bursts blooming uselessly in the darkness. Fighter regiments scramble anyway. Engines roar from icy runways as pilots climb toward coordinates that no longer mean anything. Above them all, nothing matches the radar picture. In the bunker, Captain Zoran pulls off his gloves, rubbing his temples. This isn't aircraft, he says quietly now. This is clutter, artificial clutter. The word is dangerous, new, uncomfortable. Soviet doctrine teaches that radar is truth. Radar sees what the human eye cannot. To suggest the system itself is being deceived borders on heresy. Yet the evidence is undeniable. Morozov remembers a classified briefing from months earlier, a translated German technical journal intercepted near Smolensk. At the time, it seemed theoretical, a curiosity. Thin metallic strips, cut to precise lengths, released in bundles. Radar reflectors. Captain, Morozov says carefully, choosing his words like stepping on ice. If the enemy dispersed metallic foil at altitude, it could produce returns identical to aircraft. Zoran looks at him sharply. Say that again? Thousands of pieces, each reflecting radio waves, falling slowly, drifting with wind. To radar, it would look like an armada. Silence fills the room. Then Zoran exhales through his nose. A false sky. At 02:37 hours, confirmation arrives from an unexpected source. A frontline observation post radios in. No bomb impacts, no engine noise overhead, only shimmering objects falling like silver snow. Silver snow. Morozov closes his eyes for a moment. The Germans have done it. Somewhere west of Leningrad, Luftwaffe bombers, or perhaps specialized Pathfinder aircraft, have released Dupel, aluminum strips cut to resonate precisely with Soviet radar wavelengths. The pieces fall slowly, carried by upper winds, creating phantom fleets that saturate detection systems. The radars are not broken. They are being fed lies. Moscow calls again. This time the voice on the line is colder. "Explain," the general demands. "Are we under attack or not?" Zorin straightens. "Comrade General, the enemy has deployed a new countermeasure, radar deception. We believe no bombers are present." A pause. "A belief is not certainty, Captain." "No, Comrade General, but neither is radar anymore." The line goes dead. Orders arrive minutes later. Stand down intercepts, conserve fuel, hold anti-aircraft fire unless visual contact is made. In effect, Soviet air defense has been forced to admit blindness. Above the front, German aircraft turn back westward, unchallenged, not because they struck, but because they could have. That is the victory. In the bunker, technicians collect samples brought in from outside, thin metallic ribbons tangled in snowdrifts and tree branches. Morozov holds one up to the light. It's lighter than paper, cold, ordinary. This, Petrov says quietly, shut down Leningrad's eyes. By dawn, emergency reports flood into Moscow. Engineers, physicists, and air defense commanders are summoned. New questions replace old certainties. If radar can be deceived once, it can be deceived again. And worse, if the enemy controls what you see, they control how you react. For the first time since radar towers rose across the Soviet Union, commanders must confront a terrifying reality. Technology has entered a duel with itself. And tonight, the Germans have fired the first invisible shot.
January 18th, 1943. 0640 hours. Moscow, People's Commissariat of Defense. The sun has not yet risen when the emergency meeting begins. Heavy coats steam as officers file into the conference room, boots leaving slush on the polished floor. Maps of the Western Soviet Union cover the walls, their pins and threads suddenly meaningless without reliable eyes in the sky. At the head of the table sits Lieutenant General Pavel Kurochkin, commander of Air Defense Forces for the Leningrad sector. His face is stone, but his fingers drum a nervous rhythm against the table. Across from him, civilian scientists from the Leningrad Physico-Technical Institute clutch notebooks filled with hurried calculations. None of them slept. "This is not jamming," Kurochkin begins. "Jamming is noise. This was structure, shape, behavior." One of the scientists, Dr. Sergei Lebedev, clears his throat. "The Germans exploited resonance," he says. "They didn't silence our radar. They spoke its language." Silence follows. Lebedev continues, emboldened. "Each aluminum strip acts as a dipole antenna. Cut to the correct length, it reflects radio waves efficiently. Thousands of them create the illusion of massed aircraft." "Then why did the screens go dark?" Kurochkin snaps. "Receiver overload," Lebedev answers. "Too many returns at once. The system saturated and shut itself down to prevent damage." A general swears under his breath. "This means the Redoute system, praised in newspapers, celebrated in propaganda reels, is not merely vulnerable, it can be turned against itself." By mid-morning, Stalin's office is briefed. The report is short, blunt, carefully worded.
enemy has demonstrated capability to neutralize Soviet radar through passive countermeasures. Air defense temporarily blinded without physical attack. There is no written response, but everyone in the room understands the implication. If the Germans had followed the Phantom raid with a real one, Leningrad might have burned uncontested. Back at Sector Red Banner, Morozov is summoned to a closed session with engineers flown in from Moscow. They spread schematics across tables, tracing signal paths, arguing in low voices. Change frequencies, one suggests. They'll cut different lengths, another counters. Filter slow-moving returns. Then we blind ourselves to high-altitude bombers in tailwinds. Every solution creates a new weakness. Morozov listens, then speaks. They didn't use it to bomb. They used it to test us. The room quiets. They wanted to see how we'd react, how long before fighters launch, how quickly we stand down, which sectors panic. A colonel nods grimly. A rehearsal. Outside, the war continues as before. Artillery thumps, supply convoys grind through snow, but something fundamental has changed. For the first time, Soviet commanders understand that the air war will no longer be decided solely by aircraft and pilots, but by signals, mathematics, and deception. Within weeks, orders go out to redesign radar procedures. Visual confirmation becomes mandatory. Searchlight coordination is revised. New radar sets are demanded, ones with variable frequencies, better discrimination. But innovation takes time, and the enemy already has momentum. On July 24, 1943, over Hamburg, the British unleash a similar tactic on a scale never imagined. Clouds of aluminum strips paralyze German radar, allowing bombers to devastate the city. Soviet intelligence reads the reports with grim recognition. What happened near Leningrad was not an anomaly. It was the opening chapter of electronic warfare. Morozov, promoted now, stands months later in a different bunker, watching improved screens, cleaner, sharper, but he knows better to trust them completely. Because he has learned the hardest lesson of modern war. The enemy doesn't need to destroy your weapons. They only need to convince you they're seeing something that isn't there. March 1943. Outskirts of Leningrad. Experimental Air Defense Node Number 4. Snow still blankets the forests, but the panic of January has hardened into resolve. Inside a newly reinforced bunker, Soviet radar operators work beside engineers, an arrangement that would have been unthinkable months earlier. War has accelerated hierarchy. Ideas now matter as much as rank. Senior Lieutenant Alexei Morozov stands at a redesigned console. The familiar green sweep is still there, but now it shares space with new indicators. Signal persistence timers, Doppler estimates scribbled by hand, and a crude wind drift overlay pinned to the wall. The goal is simple: separate ghosts from machines. "Contact at bearing 310, an operator calls out. Morozov watches carefully. The return blooms, then stretches, then slowly drifts south. "Wind at altitude?" he asks. 20 knots from the northwest, comes the reply. Morozov nods. Marcus suspect. This is how Soviet air defense adapts. Not with miracles, but with discipline. Operators are trained to watch behavior, not just presence. Real aircraft move with intention. Deception drifts. But the enemy adapts too.
That night, the Luftwaffe returns, this time with a hybrid attack. Small packets of Dupel precede a limited bomber force. Radar pictures blur again, but not completely. The system hesitates. Fighter regiments are launched in pairs, not waves. Searchlights sweep lower altitudes. Anti-aircraft guns hold fire until engines are heard. Bombs fall on the outskirts of the city, but the damage is limited. It is not a victory, it is survival. Reports flow east and west across the front. Both sides are learning, adjusting, counter-adjusting. Radar frequencies change, foil lengths change, filters improve, deception becomes layered. By late 1943, a new truth is accepted quietly within Soviet command. There will never be a perfect picture again. The sky has become contested not just by aircraft, but by information. Morozov receives a letter from a fellow officer transferred to Kursk. It contains a single line. We don't ask what the radar sees anymore. We ask what the enemy wants us to believe. In Berlin, German engineers congratulate themselves. In London, British planners refine the technique into an art. In Moscow, scientists push for post-war funding, knowing this invisible war will not end with victory parades. Years later, after the guns fall silent, the lesson endures. Radar will grow smaller, faster, digital. Aircraft will fly higher, then lower, then vanish entirely. Screens will become sharper than anything Morozov ever imagined. But deception will always follow, because the night Soviet radar screens went dark proved something no bomb ever could. Control is an illusion, and in modern war, the first battlefield is the mind.